Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Dave Tamulonis. I'm the events manager at the Erie Downtown Partnership, and I'm very proud to present our second Listen to Your Neighbors lecture series featuring Hayes Moses and Abdullah Washington. The weather did not cooperate this evening, and we are streaming from R. Frank Media Studios here on 8th Street. I'd like to give a big shout out to the R. Frank Media team for very quickly packing up our equipment in the park and moving the live stream inside. Ideally, we would like to have these types of conversations out in the public park and be able to engage with people, but please feel free to comment and share. And in between sessions, we'll read some comments and have Hayes and Abdullah respond to them. I also want to give a great shout out to Opened Eyes, our partner in this series, and Ellie Vahey here is going to be up to introduce our speakers. So thanks again for tuning in, and enjoy the stream.
Hello, folks. I'm Ellie Vahey of Opened Eyes. I should say a proud member of Opened Eyes, and we in Opened Eyes are proud and extremely grateful to have teamed up with the Erie Downtown Partnership for this wonderful event. Again, to echo what Dave said, big thanks to R. Frank Media. What a fantastic job these gentlemen do in quickly getting things moved around. Sometimes Mother Nature doesn't exactly agree with us, but we do have people that were able to make it here live in attendance with us, and we know that you're tuned in online as well, and we thank you so much for joining us. As Dave said, this is the second in our summer series, and we appreciate all of your attendance to come and listen to your neighbors. Just to give a quick overview of Opened Eyes, it's a local nonprofit organization led by Brandon Wiley. He was one of our speakers last month, along with Marcus Atkinson. If you haven't yet had the opportunity to check out their speeches, I would encourage you to do so. It was a great conversation set, and you can check those out at the Erie Downtown Partnership site on Facebook, as well as our Opened Eyes Facebook page as well. Brandon told the story and gave his own personal, take on the catalyst that got him started in creating Opened Eyes altogether. He was a grown man when he started and founded Opened Eyes. It was in 2014. But the catalyst, the little seed that was sown, came in 6th grade when he was just a boy, asked by a classmate, "What are you?" That one question rang out in his heart and actually served as the motivating factor to create an awesome plan. He started this organization that focuses on asking ourselves that very question, taking the time to ask ourselves the good things about us, as well as things that need improvement. And with that, he has individualized plans for trainings for companies and schools and police departments, organizations of any and all type, to whatever their specific need is, to just become more aware of the diversity of the many beautiful cultures within the world around them. Now, the differentiating factor between this organization and others that provide cultural competence and knowledge of universal diversity is the personal reflection and self-care component. That reflection piece is what ties into this whole series, where real, true, empathetic listening is encouraged. When we actually stop and take a moment to listen to our neighbors, we might be really surprised with what valuable information we take away with us, their different insights and experiences and thoughts and feelings. And I know that that is the case with our two speakers this evening. We are honored to have Abdullah Washington and Hayes Moses here tonight. Hayes is going to come up and speak with you all first. He's a native of Erie, PA. I'm sure you've all heard his name before, Hayes Moses. He is our Erie idol. I will tell you, he made it all the way to Hollywood with the gold ticket for American Idol, among his many list of accolades. I personally am grateful and honored to have shared the stage with him in singing with Erie All-Stars, Celebrate Erie. You may have seen him, or 8 Great Tuesdays. He spends his time serving children and serving in the church. He is a born and raised Erieite, graduate of Mercyhurst Prep, and earned his bachelor's degree from Edinburgh with a concentration in sociology and Africana studies. So, as I said, most of his time is divided between work with children. He works at Erie Rise Leadership Academy right here in town, and in ministry through Greater Bethlehem Temple. So he's been an active member in the Playhouse too, so you may recognize him from that stage. He is a man of many stages. So he's been in The Color Purple and Ragtime and On the Mountaintop. So we are so pleased to have him join us on this stage tonight to share some of his personal experiences. So we hope you enjoy listening to our neighbor, Hayes Moses.
Thank you so much. So much for that introduction, my good friend, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and my nerves are going and all that kind of thing, but this is just a conversation with our neighbor, and so I'm going to address it as such. Again, I'm really happy to be here tonight. I think these conversations are so needed and so needed in community. I believe that these conversations have the power to do what government can't do. We're looking at our government on every end, try so many things, and it seems like we keep hitting these stalemates, but I believe the conversation neighbor to neighbor is actually what is going to bring forth change, the necessary change, not only in our country, but right here in our community in Erie. I am a proud son of this city, born and raised in Erie, Pennsylvania. As Elliot said earlier, I was born and raised in the church on the east side of Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm saying east side. No, I was actually born on the west side. On the west side, down on West 3rd, but I grew up on the east side, right behind Burton School, and was blessed just to have so many diverse experiences. My brothers and sisters and I'm the oldest of four, and started out at Burton Elementary School on the east side, from kindergarten to 5th grade. From there, I went to Erie Day School, out on West 6th Street. I know it often gets confused with Erie Country Day, but Erie Day School on West 6th Street, and ended up graduating from Mercyhurst Prep. And so I've had some really diverse experiences just within my education coming up. At the inner city school, loved Burton, had family there, and just remember all the just great experiences, and then got to Erie Day School, and it was interesting because it was such a great school, but my brother, sister, and I made up the black population at the school. On top of that, my parents were doing some major sacrificing to send us to this great school. I think we were all three going there for the price of one student, because we didn't have the financial means to be able to go there, but my parents sacrificed for us to go there, and it just opened up another world that I had never seen before. And that was balanced out also with my upbringing in a historically black church. So I had a real balance going on there. And I remember one year I went to Academy, and I don't mean Collegiate Academy, back when it was Academy. I went there for a year and loved it. And part of what I loved about Academy was the diversity at that time. People from all parts of the community seemed like they were at Academy. And as soon as I loved it, they closed it. And I ended up finishing up my education here in the city at Mercyhurst Prep. So I'm a proud Laker as well. And so I've had a lot of diverse experiences, and they have all been unique. All of them been unique, and I think it makes me a better person because of the diversity of those experiences. I'm a lover of cities like New York, metropolitans like Chicago, where you can readily see diversity almost anywhere you go. Erie is a unique community because the diversity is here, but we often don't cross paths. I remember being at Erie Day School and shocked to hear that some of my schoolmates had never been east of State Street. And I'm like, what? And I had the opportunity to be around everywhere. And so I have had to acclimate to a lot of different environments, people in different situations. Particularly growing up, you have a tendency to change depending on where you're at and what environment you're at. And it's when we get older, we settle into who we are, and it's take me as I am. And I'm glad to be there in that place. And all of the places I have been are a part of me even now. As it was said before, I am now in education and seeing the necessity of our students being educated, and not just in books and not just in reading and arithmetic, but them being educated in culture. And I know there's one thing to read a book, And it's another thing to experience a culture. It's one thing to try to learn a language in a classroom. It's another thing to go to that environment and experience it and to get to know it for yourself. It was something, and I didn't want to be long tonight. I feel like what John the Baptist said about Jesus, there's one coming after me that I'm not worthy to undo his shoes. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Washington said. But we had met up, and it was kind of ironic. We met up a couple weeks ago, and I was coming from one appointment, going to another one. And anytime I'm asked to do something, if I can, I want to do it. But I was taken in. They said we're talking about diversity and inclusion and things of that nature. And so I got to thinking about it a little bit, but nothing was really striking me. But as I said, I am a person from the church. I do believe in God. And so I'm always looking for, like, all right, where's this thing? I wish this time I hadn't looked. We met up, I believe it was on a Friday. And then it happened to be on a Tuesday night. My car was being inspected. And just to give you a little backdrop on it, off and on, I've been living. My grandfather was a pastor in this city, the late Bishop Ratcliffe, and my grandmother, the late Azeline Ratcliffe. And I went to live with them at a when I was a teenager. I was helping out my grandmother and with my grandfather who was in ill health. And so off and on for my life for the last 30 years, I've lived at my home. Been through a lot in the middle of that, but off and on, I've lived there. And went back, my grandmother passed away in 2019, and she was battling cancer. And right after she passed, got the shocking news of my life that I was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And as you can imagine, talk about diversity and inclusion, cancer is not prejudice. It's not racist. It doesn't have any of those things. It affects all of us. And it hit our house heavy. And devastating experience, but God was good to me. I'm glad to report tonight, cancer-free and feeling well and feeling great in my body. God is good. I'm glad about that. And so we're picking our life back up and so many opportunities. I wanted to get back into education. I had worked at Erie Rise Leadership Academy, but just got this great offer from the school district, and I will be teaching 8th grade social studies with the Erie School District at the Eagle's Nest out on Pennsylvania Avenue. So we're very excited about that. And so been getting ready for that and trying to get my stuff all together and all these different things. And like I said, been living off and on at my home for the last 30 years, almost 30 years, or it has been 30 years. And neighborhood I live in, it's not South Shore Drive, but it's a nice neighborhood. To me, when I look down the street, it looks like Leave It to Beaver. Just, nice neighborhood. And I had the craziest experience 2 Tuesday nights ago. My car was down. And as my car was down, I ended up walking, which I normally don't do around the neighborhood that often. And so I was walking, and it was late at night, but it was a balmy night, and I was enjoying the walk. And it was probably around 10 o'clock that evening, and I was 2 blocks, give or take 2 blocks or maybe a block and a half away from my home. And I was on the side of the block that I never, on this particular street, I'm trying to avoid saying, and I don't want to cast any aspersions, but I was on this particular street, a busy street. I'll say it's French. Our home is the first home. On the one side is Erie, on the other side of the street is Mill Creek. So we're just starting Mill Creek. And so I was heading home about a block and a half away. And as I said, I went through cancer. I still got, if you look on my chest real close, you can see where I still have the port. Still have to do some different treatments. And I remember when I got close to being done, my feet started bothering me because one of the effects of the chemo was it left me with neuropathy in my feet. And it's not bad at all, but this particular night, because I was walking, it started bothering me a little bit. So I remember I took my shoes off for a second. And then I put them back on, and I was walking, I'll tell you this, I was walking by Veterans Hospital. Was just getting past there. And I was walking, it was around 10 o'clock at night, and my phone had died. So I wasn't on the phone talking or anything, so I'm just walking through the neighborhood. And I weigh 150 pounds. I had on a pink polo shirt. I had on what I consider some preppy shorts that had on, I think they got some pineapples or little on them. So to me, I look rather unassuming, walking through my neighborhood that is, to be honest with you, is predominantly white. I got to be about 10 o'clock, and as I'm almost getting home, and the neuropathy was kind of bothering me, but my phone had died, so I'm not talking on the phone and pretty quiet, just walking through. I start hearing something behind me. Before I knew it, I look back, and it's a pit bull chasing me. And I'm terrified because I know I got this condition with my feet, and I'm like, I can't really explain to you. You can just imagine being in that situation. And so I start running to the point I ran out of my shoes. And the dog's owner, she comes out. She happened to be a white woman. And she's letting the dog chase me. And it just happened to be a farmer's market across the street. You got to think quick. I ran out into the street, and a white pickup truck almost hit the dog and myself. And I'm thinking to myself, we're going to survive cancer to get killed out here on the street. And the lady's encouraging her dog after me. I said, ma'am. And I was just fortunate enough or blessed enough, 2 weeks ago, I jumped up on the wooden gate of the farmer's market that was there. And even though I'm terrified, I'm scared, thinking I don't know what kind of security they've got out here, if something's going to happen, if the police are going to see me, if something's going to be, because it's looking like I'm maybe trying to steal something, but this dog is chasing me. It's nothing but the grace of God. The dog got as close as he could get to me, but he never bit me. I jumped up on top of the fence, and the lady's on the corner. I'm at a distance from her, but we can see each other and hear each other. And because of the nature of it, normally I would have been angry. Just to be honest with you, I'd have been angry. Get your dog. What are you doing? You know, I immediately went there. My fear of this dog, and if I spoke hostile to the owner, I'm begging the lady on top of the fence. I'm near tears. I'm 45 years old, a grown man. I'm near tears. I'm like, ma'am, please, get your dog. Please, ma'am, get your dog. The lady just kept asking me one question over and over again. I'm a block and a half from the house I've been living at off and on for 30 years. And she says, what are you doing in this neighborhood? She just keeps asking me. I said, ma'am, I live right around the corner. I gave her my street, the street where I lived on. And no matter what I said to her, I'm standing up there. I'm hollering to people passing by. Somebody, please help me. The dog is at the thing, and I'm standing on top of this wooden gate. And I'm saying, ma'am, like I said, my normal reaction, I'm a pretty good guy, but I'm not that good of a guy. My normal reaction would have been to be angry. But being in this vulnerable position and not wanting this dog to further attack me, I'm begging the lady. I kept putting my hands together like this and saying, ma'am, please, ma'am, I'm begging you. I said, I live right around the corner, neighbor to neighbor. I said, please get your dog. I was up there for probably about 3 minutes, which doesn't probably sound long to you, but in that situation, it's the longest 3 minutes of my life. And no matter what I said to the lady, she just kept repeating those two sentences. What are you doing in this neighborhood? And then she said, what are you doing in our neighborhood? And I thought, wow. Now you got to understand, and I gave you my experiences intentionally, that I went to Erie Day School, which is a very affluent school in this city. I graduated from Mercyhurst Prep. I'm a dark-skinned black man, but I weigh 150 pounds. And I'm not the kind of guy that white people or black people are intimidated by my body. I weigh 150 pounds. I just got back from a doctor's appointment. And I'm thinking to myself when I got finally, it was nothing but the grace of God that she never moved. She never came to get her dog. She just stood there. It's 10 o'clock at night. I'm hollering. A couple cars stopped, thank God. A couple cars were stopping, but they had to keep moving because traffic's busy on this particular street. And one guy, I remember hollering, what's going on? I said, this dog. I said, I need help. Please help me. The lady never moved. She stayed on that corner across the street, on the corner. She never moved. She just kept asking me those questions. And finally, by the grace of God, the dog stopped barking at me. He sniffed around, and the dog eventually just went on there while I'm standing on top of this gate at this farmer's market. And I thought, you got to understand not only the terror of that moment, having defeated, went through 6 months of chemotherapy and thinking I could have ran out in the street and it'd be all over, because I narrowly missed getting hit because of this dog coming out. And then I'm thinking, I got on a pink polo shirt, I got on preppy pants, I got on some white, I think I had on white Adidas. I weigh 150 pounds. What about me walking down the street, a block and a half from my neighborhood, strikes fear in you? What made you do that? What made that happen? And I got to thinking about the moment that we as a country that are living in. Somebody probably is listening to this thinking, well, that dogs get loose, people do, that kind of thing happens. And I think Eric Garner was just selling loose cigarettes. Sandra Bland didn't have her turning signal on. And how small moments like those, if we don't stop and pause, can erupt into something none of us wants to see in our community. None of us wants to see that. No one should have to. And I got to thinking about other things. My aunt was the first black policewoman in this city. And so I was raised in how to respect authority. Should you ever be stopped by the cops, how you should speak, how you should approach. And I got to tell you, as a person that if I showed you the Rainbow Coalition, that's my friends. I go in and out of this community all the time. I don't leave my house. I often get up, run to the country fair because I got taste for some snacks. Every time I leave the house, and it's after a certain time at night, I'm 45 years old. I'm a teacher. I'm probably about the most nonviolent person you're going to meet. But I'm still have this apprehension. I don't want anybody to be intimidated, a cop. I think sometimes even the way growing up we even dressed was a way not to come off offensive or not to come off, look at me, I'm one of the quote unquote not harmful ones. And yet it's still standing there 150 pounds, 6 foot tall, in a pink polo shirt, preppy shorts. A dog was sicked on me for walking down the street a block and a half from my neighborhood. And it just made me to think, like I said, what could that have actually turned into? If I had had something on me, what would that moment have turned into? And what I want to implore, this is conversations and listening to our neighbors, is that I'm going to do all I can in my ability to do it. And I'm going to implore and ask that we as a community, let us start to pause. Let's pause. Before we make the assumption, before we do the initial response of fear, let us pause. Let us pause. When we look at the racial upheaval that has happened in our country, I looked at those and examined those cases. Those weren't riots. What happened to George Floyd, there was no riot going on there. That was a moment. That was somebody doing something in a moment that went tragically and horribly wrong. What happened with Sandra Bland, as I said, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, you can go list name for name for name for name. Those weren't things where we all got out and got our oozes and we said we about to fight. That didn't happen like that. The way neighbors responded to each other. I know this is in a church service, but I'm often thinking we are a country that takes pride, many of us, in saying we're a Christian nation. And Jesus implores us that we would love our neighbor as ourself. And I think no matter who it is, I say it for the Muslim, I say it for the LGBTQ community, I say it for the woman walking down the street. Let us all pause. Let us all pause. It can make the difference, not only in life and death, it makes the difference in how we relate to one another. It makes a difference. None of us are better than the other. I'm not better than anyone. I'm not more moral. My dark skin doesn't make me more moral or that. It's not that at all. But we have got to start to pause. It shouldn't matter what I have on. If I had on some jeans and my baseball cap to the side, everybody should be able to walk down the street in peace. Everybody. I look at that situation and I think the beauty of it is, and it made me question myself. I can think of incidents and times where I made a stereotypical assumption, only to find out you got to get to know people. I remember talking to my sister recently, if I can say that. I think I can say this. We were talking, having this conversation, and we were talking about, everybody's really spazzing out about pronouns now, about, well, we shouldn't have to call you this or call you that, you got to get to know a person. And I was sitting there, I said, well, I can kind of get, if I see you and I assume that you're the, and my sister kept talking to me, and I said, well, the way you're talking, the only way that we'll ever know is I'd have to sit down and get to know the person. My sister looked at me and said, imagine that. And it really was. It was a wake-up moment for me. I was like, wow. That's what will bring about more understanding. I'm talking about my own fallacy where I've come up short. That instead of assuming something about an individual, I might have to sit down with you for a few minutes and get to know who you are. And I've never had a situation where that was a bad thing. I'm a guy that likes theater. I'm in the church. I'm into music. The person I trust most in this city outside of my mother is a white guy with tattoos that listens to this hard grunge music I don't understand for the life of me. I ask him all the time, dude, what's with the music? It's so like this thing. He is also one of the most beautiful spirited, giving, intelligent people that I know. And my life is richer. My life is richer for having him in my life. To the point, he asked me to marry him and his wife a couple of years ago. That's how close we are. And so I don't want to be too long. I think I've said enough. And like I said, I want to give Big Washington enough time to say what he's going to say. But if I leave anything with anybody tonight, I want to leave that message. Before you respond or react based on what you see or assume, let us all take a breath and just pause. God bless you, and God bless Erie.
Wow, Hayes, thank you so much. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you for that. Just amazing. We appreciate you. Next up, we have a gentleman who also knows the stage quite well. When he is not using his art to promote social causes, Abdullah Washington is known as the poet Big Wash. Also, a little tidbit of information which some may not know, he actually performed in Night of the Living Dead as well.
Oh, wow.
So he was on the stage in that capacity too. He is now the master of ceremonies for the Erie Blues and Jazz Festival. He's done all kinds of really amazing things. He was one of the 12 inaugural TED Talk speakers in 2015. He's opened up for the legendary rapper KRS-One and the poets Amiri Baraka and Sonia Sanchez. He's got a spoken word album called Infinity Gems. It was released in 2016 as part of the Erie County Poet Laureate Initiative, and it was declared one of the top 3 full-length albums produced in Erie County that year. I mean, he's got a really deep resume that precedes him, and I know that he's got some things to share with you as well. So without further ado, Big Wash, Abdullah Washington.
I just want to start this by saying that this is a far more intimate setting than I anticipated, but this is good because I'm among friends. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Erie Downtown Partnership. Thank you, Opened Eyes. A lot of times when we say thank you, there's a context. where it's just a kind of a greeting. There's a context where we say thank you, and it's in response to something done. And the response is typically anyone. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. So when we talk about a lot of these issues, what we're really talking about is the presence of it, or the intention of being welcoming or not. And I just wanted to start with a poem, because I'm a poet, called The New Colossus, that was written by Emma Lazarus as part of a fundraiser for a construction project for the Statue of Liberty, to illustrate the type of welcoming community we like to think of when we think of America. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, when conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon laden glows worldwide welcome. Her mind eyes command. I'm messing this up. I apologize, guys. I'm kind of nervous if you can't tell. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she. With silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I don't know about you, but that's a welcoming message. I know that I'm at home when I reach the threshold and there's a welcome mat. We have a lot of laws in this country that have been developed over the years, a lot of history of struggle in this country. And we can write all the laws that we want. But if they're not executed with their heart in the right place, then they mean absolutely nothing. I have a relative who tells me about one of his early training experiences working for Xerox back in the day. And he said after they had gone through all the testing and whatnot and thought they had made it through the woods, they had to eat a lunch. And he and all the other trainees got in the lunch line. And as they chose their food, they looked up and noticed that the service providers on the other side put all their chosen items onto a clean garbage can lid. And the proctors and administrators just looked at them. And, none of them wanted to eat anything. And they began to ask them, well, look, what's wrong? What's the problem? Everything here is clean. These are brand new lids. Eat. Do you think they were very hungry when they saw that? So what they were missing was a spirit of welcomeness. And that's oftentimes what we do to each other. There's nothing that can replace a welcoming spirit when we're dealing with each other across communities in our own city. Oftentimes, that's what is missing. I don't know how many people realize this. There have been some articles recently with all the development that's going on in Erie regarding the history of the West Bayfront area. That was an area that was a thriving black community back in the day, and it had the name of New Jerusalem. So a lot of times when we think about immigration and immigrants, Erie is a Class A resettlement area. There is a growing population of refugees in our great city, and they are definitely making it better in many ways. I told a young man who's running for office currently, Zachariah Sharif, I told him one of the things that I'm so pleased to see in those new American communities is the fact that the younger people from those communities they have so much respect for each other across their different national origins and whatnot. They're not like what we're used to seeing in typical divided American communities. I mean, all of us, you just need to think about a generation ago when our parents or grandparents were fighting based on them being Italian or black or whatever. I mean, the new Americans now, these younger people, they are used to seeing each other as a community, often across many of these cultural, racial and religious lines. And that is important. It brings its own power to it, and it's inspiring. But a lot of times what we forget is that the black Americans in Erie and all across the country here, we are refugees in many ways as well. Why else would we call our community of that day New Jerusalem? There's a book, it's called The Ark of Justice. It was written by Mr. Kevin Boyle that I was introduced to not too long ago. This book is about the migration. There's two main surges referred to as the Great Migration after World War I or during World War I and World War II of African American communities from the South, in my case, Mississippi, my family's case. And there's a whole history of what are known as race riots. And through the majority of them, the way we think of a race riot is not how, I mean, this is an evolving phenomenon. And typically what they were is that the black community would show up in a city and they would be attacked by the people identifying as white in that community, just trying to get jobs, just trying to live. Some of them for being too successful. So this happened all across the country, but we were fleeing that gross, and when people say racism, they were fleeing that thing. And I actually work with a man named Tom Weber. His father was one of the main federal judges who desegregated a lot of Erie back in the 60s and the 70s, dealing, whether it's the police unions. It wasn't just them. I mean, obviously there were a lot of people leading the community who got, I believe they hired 20 black police officers all at once. And he was there for a lot of these legal cases with the school system, a lot of the restrictive clauses. And it took a lot of work on a lot of people's parts to accomplish that. But here we are today dealing with these issues. But certainly in the 60s and 70s, you're still talking about generations of work just to be able for black people to enjoy the types of things that are commonly enjoyed by white Americans. So, we're in the North, but you still have this sense, this invisible sense that there's still a sign for whites only and a sign for blacks only. I mean, is that welcoming? My son was up here not too long ago, and I took him to the park, and he plays this game. It's called, what's the Pokemon Go game. And to people who play it, areas, casual open areas are a field of play. There's something that there's a hunt. And he'd sit there at the park and play this game on his phone, and I witness, he's so good at this, I would witness adults pull up in their cars trying to get the Pokemon that he's trying to get, and he's sending them on their way. And after a while, I kind of got what's going on, and I would just laugh. And he was just, these are grown people like me, and he's in there just eating them up. And I'm like, man, you know what? There was a whole reality that exists, that even though there's no rule written at that park that says do this, don't do that, this is still being played, right? So when we talk about being welcoming, there's a lot of factors. There's a saying that every person is fighting a war that you don't know about, right? So that's important to consider when you're talking about being welcoming. All the rules and the game isn't necessarily obvious to everyone, but it's important to understand that and to accept that fact. But I'll tell you, that welcoming mat, a lot of times, now this is only in movies, I'm sure nobody here does this. When you lift that welcoming mat, a lot of times there's a key under that mat, right? A lot of times Being truly welcome is knowing that the intention of the people that you're dealing with is clear. That involves a certain amount of trust, which means that people have to put themselves out there a little bit. I have to assume that you have good intentions. And I would expect you to assume that I have the best of intentions as well. But a lot of times people don't want to be vulnerable. But that's what being welcome, and that's what being welcoming requires of us. And that is what makes a difference. So I just want to say to all the institutions in town, I know this has been mentioned several times before, but in 2018 in the city of Erie, we were labeled as the worst city in the country for African Americans. And that's saying a lot. 2 years later, we were 14th. Now, there's some movement there, but I mean, I'm a math guy. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but there are 36,000 incorporated areas in America. So there's like really no difference between 1 and 14th. So what I'm going, I just want to say, I just want to say a thank you to everybody, all these organizations, and everybody in the city of Erie. Because we want to talk about being welcoming. So I want to say thank you. And you can say you're welcome, because I live here too, and we all live here, right? And this is something we do for each other. I want to thank you for everyone who is seriously concerned about diversity and inclusion in the city, about hiring and education. We just heard from Hayes Moses, and thank God he was given an opportunity to teach, because our students in our city need brothers like him. I want to say thank you because about 1% of our teachers in our public school system are teachers of color, while 60% of our students are students of color. 40% of our students are African American. So we have, even though he's not teaching at a public, it's just great to have someone like him there. It means a lot. I was in this conversation with some people in the Script Project. We had a meeting, and you'll hear me wrap this up mentioning them. We had a meeting with the representatives of the the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. And one of the things that was mentioned was that people learn leadership models from their teachers. So a lot of these problems that we have, it's because, you have a lack of African American authority figures. Just from going to school and not having to do anything that a black person, whether you're black or not, has to tell you. So that is an issue. Besides the fire department and the police department, all these organizations, we're all key. It's about representation. It's about inclusion and diversity, because you can't solve a problem without including the people who you perceive as presenting the problem. Those people are often the key. So if you're excluding them, you're not all your work is just performative, and it means nothing. And by not acknowledging the leaders in those communities, you are sending the message that those people, not the leaders, but the people themselves, don't matter. I mean, as sad as it is, we need to be able to retain talent. The young people shouldn't have to leave Erie because they can't get a job because they're of color, or they're not related to somebody who's already got the supervisory position in that role. That also works against the community. So when we talk about being welcoming and being welcome, that's also what we're talking about. I know I'm talking about a lot of things that they sound kind of impersonal to people, but I just want to state this case. I hate being in this position. Nobody likes to be vulnerable, and this is going somewhere, I promise you. I was one of the 12 inaugural TED Talk speakers from TEDx Erie, and they gave us a black hoodie to wear. And on the back of it, it said the theme of our program, the rising tide. And so I decided I was going to go walk down the Perry Square. This is probably about 2 years after the TED Talk. And I was going to wear my black hoodie. And people have seen me wearing this thing before. But I'm sitting down on the park, ironically, reading, let's see. It's a very popular success book. It's called, it's not Win Friends and Influence People. I'll think of it later. But basically, I'm sitting there reading this classic self-help book. And 2 police officers come up to me, and they just promptly tell me, okay, it's time to go. And I'm like, what is Perry Square? I've been here. You know, I've lived away from Erie for a while, and I've come back over the years, but it's Perry Square. So I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? And I'm like, sir, you know, I don't want to stand up because I realize these guys are shorter than me. And I'm like, okay, well, this could be perceived as being aggressive, right? So I asked them, well, what's the problem? They said these young ladies accuse you of accosting them. And I said, I just got here. I haven't been here 5 minutes. I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, you know what? And this is me, and I'll tell you why later. Why don't you go ask them if I'm the person they're talking about? And they said, well, they said it was a black man in a black hoodie. And anybody who's black can tell you that saying that it was a black man is not descriptive at all. There were black people from my complexion and lighter to all the way, you know, I mean, it's not descriptive at all. It doesn't help. It's not like saying I saw a red car. It's not at all. So for those of you who don't understand that, that's why it angers us, because literally what it's telling the world is that you're lazy. There's nothing at all about this person that you remember or recall than the fact that they were you believe they were an African American. That's what you're saying. And so they went to go talk to these women. They couldn't believe I was still sitting there. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm a business manager. That's my background. So I'm going to try to de-escalate the situation. So they come back and they apologize to me and find somebody else. I'm sure that's not what they were expecting. So I'm asking you, was that welcoming? There were plenty of police officers in this city. I thank you for doing your jobs correctly and appropriately. I'm sure that's what happens the majority of the time here. But my issue is that we seem to have missed something. I mean, I live in a city where there have been police abuses in recent years. And it seems to me as if the city finds it acceptable from time to time to pay out large sums of money instead of training the people and fixing this situation. So I thank each and every person who is engaged with trying to solve this particular problem. Because I'll tell you a worse story. People ask me, like, why did you come back here? I lived in several major cities, and one of the cities that I was privileged to work in was Minneapolis. And the first store that I managed, 80% of our customers were from East Africa. It was an incredible experience. Many of those people were refugees. They were a large percentage of them were from one of 5 different Somali communities that were actually at some level at war with each other in East Africa. And I'll never forget, the other co-manager there was a young white man who had went to we talked, and he went to college with he had one of his closest friends and roommates was a Muslim man. So he didn't have a lot of these stereotypes and everything about Muslims and foreigners, as a lot of people had. But people know that, I don't know, well, a lot of people know in Minneapolis, it's not like Erie where you find so much, and again, I haven't been there for several years. It may have changed somewhat now, but the core communities all come from a similar background. They tend to be Scandinavian people. People from Minneapolis. So there's a lot of cultural differences. If you haven't noticed, I talk with my hands, and those people don't typically do that. It was funny because we had one of the other managers in our district was Italian. And we would joke about how our behaviors can be scary to them because they're kind of, they tend to be like kind of reserved in their gestures and whatnot. So that was a point of humor between us. And so you had this difference between the younger people there and the older people there and the traditions that were in the area, even though there were so many immigrants there. So there was a dichotomy of the social, of the people in the system, their response to those communities. And one of them was that they had a rash of cab drivers being killed. And many of them, they came from these African countries where they were engineers and all types of things, but they were not given employment adequate to their experience and their certification. So a lot of them had to drive cabs. And what the city's response, the Twin Cities area, their response was ultimately the people lobbied them to be able to have an office in the state capitol there. And so they were constantly lobbying on their behalf to fix the situation the community was in. And the great thing about it is that they were, even though they were fighting in Africa, they were able to recognize that they had a common interest and would work together here in the United States. And so it was refreshing to see that. So the city had a long way to go. I was ultimately given a store immediately. I wasn't even there for a year because there was that particular location for a year because they needed more managers, and I actually was the most experienced manager, even as a new manager of that area that they had in that particular chain. It was Starbucks, if I can say that. Ooh. In that particular market. So they gave me my own store. And it was interesting because, I couldn't tell you what the percentage of black people were in the population there in the city, but none of my employees had ever had a black boss, except for one of them, and his name was Steve. And Steve had been in the military, of course, and that was his experience. So we would always kind of talk about that. It was just something that would come and go. And with the rest of them, I don't want to say with the rest of them, I had ongoing issues because I realized more times than not, I would have to give them quotes directly from our training materials for them to understand that when I told them to do something, that they were required to do it and that they would be written, like that was a serious obstacle. And so I had trained all of my supervisors and a couple extra people on how to order our milk. And this is a cafe. We use a lot of milk, right? And they all had a system of accountability there, but, everybody doesn't like everybody every day, and people try to get away with stuff. I was off of work that day. I was at home with my wife, and, for the longest time, she was struggling with cancer. So everyone knew that I was serious about my off time. And so I get a phone call. I get a phone call that I don't want to get, okay? We had a busy store. I was just turning that store into, we were just turning into a $500,000 store at that particular location. The store I had previously, we had co-managers. We were doing over $1 million at that particular store, and they said that they ran out of milk. And I'm like, come on, you know what I'm saying? I can't be the only one. How do you run out of milk at a cafe? It's kind of, you know what I'm saying? That's like saying McDonald's doesn't have hamburgers. You know what I'm saying? So I get this call, and I'm like, do I want to go up and deal? And then I'm just like, you know what? This is a reflection, no matter what these people think of you. You know what I'm saying? In retail, perception is reality. In the restaurant game, perception is reality. So I get up. I'm basically half dressed. I'm not looking like I'm doing anything, but I go down there, and because I'm salaried, of course, the least I can do is save my labor hours and not have one of these employees of mine go on and trying to go get this milk. So I look the situation up and down. I make sure that everybody's covered as far as supervisors. And I go out there, and I can't remember if we had store credit cards. So I go out there to Hennepin, actually, a street in Minneapolis that's really, that's like a more liberal but like uptown kind of like area, like where all the nice restaurants are and stuff. That's not right down. The area I was in had 4-star restaurants and stuff in it too. But this area was more like a relaxed environment. It wasn't so corporate. So I think, surely I'll go to the grocery store there and get my milk. And we needed so much I had to make 2 trips. So I ended up spending almost $500. I paid these people $500 in going and picking up this milk and driving it back to my store. The second time I went to the place to get the other half of the milk, I paid for it and I leave. And I look behind me, and every black employee that they have is lined up outside the front of the store. And I get to my car, and I open the door and go put this milk in there. And I hear this: "Stop and show me your receipts." And I don't think she said it quite that way. I turn around, and there's this blonde police officer there with a gun pointed at me. And I said, I can't believe, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't believe this. I just paid you guys $500. And I can't imagine how they think that I somehow smuggled. Like, do you know what that much milk looks like in gallons? And they took all this time to get their black employees out there, but at no point in time could they look at the receipts and see that I paid for this stuff. It was more important for them to put a gun in my face to comply to them than to figure out if I was an honest customer. And so, I'm not thinking, first of all, but I am thinking because I don't want to get shot. I had a wife at home who's sick. And part of me was like, this is not funny. But I realized that if I did anything that made her nervous at all, even for a second, my receipts are in the car. If you want me to go, if you want me to get those receipts, I got to open that car door. So I don't know what happened. But through the process of it all, I was allowed to present her something. I don't know how I didn't get shot. And I was so angry at not being able to express it or say anything and thinking about how the story could get flipped around. The other part of this I should have said first. Man, when I went into the barbershop the first time in Minneapolis, we were watching the TV, and I said, brothers, what is going on here? I'm looking at the TV, and every time something happens to or something is done by a black man in that city, they would say, this man was robbed or shot or whatever, and he had been in Minneapolis. He came here 3 years ago from Gary, Indiana, or somewhere else. And I said, how'd you guys get used to this? Every time a black man's on television, the news is telling people that they're not from the city. Just black folks. And all I could think to myself at that moment is, if this woman kills me, they're going to say, Abdullah Washington moved here from Cleveland, Ohio. And that would be it. As if to say, these aren't our Negroes. They don't know how to behave. That's all I could think. When I went back to my job, nobody had anything comforting to say to me. My district manager didn't offer to call anybody or say anything. There was it didn't feel like a welcoming place is what I'm trying to tell you. And I've had incidents my whole life just from being black in this country, I can say, and I've spent as much time as I can trying to be unassuming and unthreatening and everything else to people. But I just can't imagine why I was perceived as a threat when I just spent all this money there, if nothing else. I can't imagine doing that as a business person to a customer of mine. But just the fact that nobody who I worked with had anything constructive to say or supportive to say to me. None of them offered to do anything. I wasn't offered a day off or, you know what I'm saying? Like nothing. And so that factored into one of my decisions to come back out this way, because I really, this is the ultimate. If you were to die today, your job, you know what I'm saying? It would keep going like clockwork, and nobody, would say a single thing to you about that. I don't think that was very welcoming. No, I don't. I will say a bright spot has been seeing that community, and I know this is going to be controversial, but to see the career of Representative Ilhan Omar coming out of those communities, it just speaks to the fact that organization can create opportunities. And every time, I mean, a lot of people have other associations. I don't care. To me, it allows me to recognize. You have to say, as an American, the fact that we're able to be so inviting and so welcoming and offer opportunities to people who we don't necessarily know or want to understand. I mean, it says something strong about what we're supposed to be about and what we've somewhat gotten away from. But it's important that we bring this back together. I mean, because in the face of police harassment and other things like that, I mean, I know that I didn't have to be here. I mean, obviously the story isn't over when the George Floyd, if those who, you know, I'm the type of person who used to go out and protest things and stuff all the time. I still get out here and do stuff. But this whole time, after seeing the George Floyd, his murder, this has been in the back of my mind this entire time. And that was over a $20 bill that turned out to not be fake. So it's true that people have died for less. It's true that our neighbors are worth more. So that's just a painful reality. No, I can tell you that no man wants to admit, you know, that they're vulnerable. But, you know, the way that black men are promoted in this country as violent or any number of aggressive things and whatnot, you know, you have to just face facts that if you knew that you would go outside of your house and be vulnerable to other people just for being, you might want to try to get ahead of that a little bit. You might just want to try either by dressing nice or trying to say all the right words or knowing the right people or even being seen as aggressive. But in the back of your mind, you know that this is the reality of living in this country. So I want to thank everybody who puts an effort into making Erie a more inclusive, a more welcoming place. We all owe it to each other. I mentioned the script project earlier. I'm fortunate to work with them. We're concentrating on creating a new script for, I hate using the term minority groups, but I mean marginalized groups, I should say, is a better one for this area. And you're going to hear more about that. And I am thankful that you all are here, that I was given this opportunity, and I hope that makes me welcome. That's the most I can say. I want to know that there's a key in being in this city for everybody, not just at the city, not just at the bank. You know, we hold it within ourselves to have the power to make whole families, whole people feel whole and welcome. It's a choice that we make every day. The laws can't do it by themselves, although they are necessary. But I just want to thank you. And as a poet, I brought a poem of my own called "Build." This is on NPR. This is on WQLN on the Poetry Minute. If you haven't heard it, but if we build it, the day will come when we've got every little thing we need. If we build it, the way will come. If we're serious and truly believe. How well did you sleep? Did you eat? And did I say that I love you lately? Sometimes it might seem like our lives have left this building, but let's build you up. A whole lot of folks will try to tear you down, but let's build you up. Now, we can build our house out of bricks or straw, and we both know that love is the only law, because a house is not a home without our foundation. and I can't stand a house divided against itself. Why such high demand on our mental health? Now our lives are in this building, so let's build you up. Open Eyes and the Downtown Partnership, Erie Downtown Partnership, I thank you for having me here. I'd like somebody to tell me I'm welcome, but I want to say I feel welcome. Thank you and bless you all. All right.
You're always welcome. Thank you again, Abdullah Washington, Big Wash, and Hayes Moses for speaking at our second Listen to Your Neighbors lecture series. The next one is August 19th, and it should be in Perry Square. So see us there with Opened Eyes, our partners, and thanks again for tuning in. Have a good night.
God bless. God bless.
Thank you.